Oh, thank God it was just a dream. Oh, God. What do you mean I have a list to do? Seriously? You guys clicked on this? You read the title, right? Look, if they didn't put any effort into creating these, why do I have to put effort into mocking them? Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, fine. Fine. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Game Hub. I'm your host, Gamer K, and Villain Month continues, and this one is it's an awful one. There are times when bosses and villains in video games are the pinnacle of the game. They're the main threat, they're what sets off the adventure, and they're what we have to stop in order to win. But on a rare occasion, and from the look of this list, a pretty good rare occasion, the villain of the story is well, to use a word I'm using, lackluster, where they had all this kind of buildup, all this feeling that they were a big threat, and turns out they fell off the pedestal that was so high, they couldn't even injure an ankle. So, lackluster villains. What counts as a lackluster villain? So, well, a villain throughout the game that if they weren't, like, you feel like their presence could have been filled in with a generic villain and nothing would feel different. If their build-up was so grand, but it felt very middle of the road villains, like nothing super fantastic, nothing amazing, or if you can figure it out right off the get-go, it kind of removes a little bit of the tension that builds throughout the game. So, how am I doing this list? Well, obvious my rules, 1 game per series, games and bosses I've beaten, and I'm leveling them by a certain ratio. So the less they're in the game, but the feeling of them is still there, and if the reveal flops, they're lower on the list. But if they're grander throughout the game, but later on it feels like I said, if they could have been replaced with a generic villain, yeah, it's boring. Or in some of these cases, if it was a villain that had great promise, but then the next time we see them, they are, again, it's like if they were great throughout the race, but then they stumbled at the finish line and everyone else passed them. Feels like that half the time. Well, no one else is going to go through this crap, so let's do it. This is Gamer K's Top 13 Lackluster Video Game Villains. And why Top 13? Because here at the Game Hub, only the odd can be number 1. I just wish it wasn't this kind of odd. Starting off this list is a entry from a game by a company that we haven't really heard word of for a good while. I'm talking about Quantic Dream's Detroit Become Human. Such a beautiful game, amazing sci-fi story that has so much iRobot inspiration to it. I'm just going to say that. But it felt so it felt so right. Until we get to the end of the game. if you guys did the good, really, really, really good ending, where everyone lives and basically nothing bad happens, we get face to face with someone we've encountered throughout the game, but always kind of felt like there was a little bit more going on. And I'm not talking about Man Bun Jackass, who appeared very little in his own... Yeah. I'm talking about the ghost in the machine of our android boy, Connor, Amanda, who was the creator or his handler, but she's just an AI program in his circuits who's... Yes. She was in our head the whole time, literally. Used to be Connor's mentor, but then, from what I remember, I guess she died many years ago, and she implemented herself as an AI for inside Connor. Where if we go revolt, where if we go rogue, or deviant as they call it, and everything good throughout the end with Connor and Hank, Amanda will show up and try to imprison Connor's will again and force him to execute Marcus. Yeah, pretty much halfway points in Connor's story, we will be talking to her about the situations that happened and the decisions that we made. And again, at first I thought this was, again, his head programmer, and she was just loaning him out to help solve the crimes of the deviants and to cover it all up afterwards. But fighting against her, Amanda isn't that great. Primarily because there's no real fight. We just do QTE sections and have Connor resist the reprogramming. That's it. What puts Amanda at the very bottom of this list is, as interesting as the twist was, it could have been, again, it could have been any other program. It could have been anything else. And again, it wouldn't have made any difference if it wasn't as epic as it could have been. Well, yeah, that's all I gotta say for that one. Okay, as much as I love to comment on Final Fantasy, my knowledge of it is very limited. Considering I don't really play games like that. I don't really like the turn-based system unless it's, unless it's Persona 5. So, Final Fantasy 13? Hey, it's a negative list, so be thankful. And I know what you guys are probably expecting. And you're most likely right. Daisley, the head honcho of whatever their whole place is called, this guy who makes the Pope look like a poor person. Look at this guy's clothing. It looks religious, yet futuristic at the same time, which actually fits in with the theme for the game. So after going after Daisley, our 6 heroes come to the truth of that he's been behind pretty much everything. But our thoughts that he's a lessee is dashed immediately when he transforms for the boss fight into his true form, Barthandelus, voice of the Sanctum and Lord Sovereign of the Cocoon Foul Sea. Now, I love his boss fights. I actually do like them. From his Foul Sea design, which is somewhat angelic, but also twisted at the same time, to his second one, where it just looks generic, but then as the fight goes, his face opens up and reveals these angelic faces along him. Now, and again, his boss fights and his design is what gets him so low on this list. Everything else, oh my god. Having only playing Final Fantasy XIII once and never replaying it again, because I'm not that dumb. Okay, I don't want to say dumb, but I'm not a glutton for punishment. Okay, I am, but once is enough. His whole plan feels... Okay. Anyone who's not into lore of Final Fantasy like I am, listen to the cutscenes of his explanations for his goal, and you tell me if it makes any lick of sense the first run. It doesn't. It's so confusing. I mean, he wants the pulse, or he wants the heroes who return into the sea to kill Orphan, which is basically the power source of the city, and have it crash into Grand Pulse. It has very Majora's Mask, Moon Devastation feel to it, but if you replace his character with something completely different, but keep the bosses the same, nothing really feels different if you were to do so. So yeah, he's lower on the list because his boss fight is the only thing that I like, and his design. His goal and his everything about it just feels... Yeah, I got nothing. Of all the games that I played this year, and one I've reviewed and gave a lot of praise, the main threat of a mystery should either be something that fills all the blanks during the investigation, makes sense to the whole scheme at large. This one doesn't. From Sherlock Holmes' latest game, The Awakened, we have the cult leader, rich dude who faked his death that we had no clue about until we researched it, Archibald Rochester. So I'm going to basically spell this out as easily as I can, if that makes sense, if this makes any sense. The dude faked his death, and he was rich. Faked his death, joined became the leader of a Lovecraftian cult, had a bunch of people, kidnapped slaves, aka people of Maui descent, a whole bunch of poor people, in order to do experiments on them and have them jump off the cliff of a lighthouse to appease Cthulhu. What? This is Sherlock Holmes, right? And throughout the whole thing, and we all, okay, and this is a terrible villain, very lackluster. I was expecting something super grand, and the worst thing is, at the end, we don't get to see Cthulhu. Yeah, dark cutscene and end. Okay, cutscene back in London, but the whole thing feels cookie cutter. Well, not even cookie cutter. It feels lackluster. It feels like it doesn't make sense. Rochester, we never see him throughout the game. He's mentioned right before we solve where he is. Nothing connects to anything throughout the cases. Okay, well, one long case that leads to a whole bunch of other areas. It's completely boring. He talks to Holmes like they've been there before, but like another life and everything, and obviously Sherlock isn't one to accept that. He's just rambling. There's no coherentness. This guy should be like really high on the list. But there are so many other villains that have a little bit grander ambiance and presence, and they are worse in execution. So this guy gets a pass, and I'm really like I've said before, I really hope in the next Sherlock Holmes we get Irene Adler for once. Please. Please. There are times when I really hate talking about Mega Man Battle Network. 6 games. One of them has a villain that was being manipulated. 3 of them have one of the best villains ever. And 2 of them have something so boring that the anime made him better. I am talking about the villain of 4 and 5, Dr. Regal. This guy has evil villain marked on his face. He's more nonchalant than goddamn Dr. Evil. And I love that guy. But Dr. Regal is so nonchalantly the villain. Like, if he had maybe a partner who wasn't evil right off the bat and it was tricking us, I'd buy it. But no, we see him right at the get-go. We know he's going to be the villain. I mean, cybernetic monocle much? And his plans are so meh. Use dark chips to make navvies feel hatred and evil. Cause the Duo satellite machine to come crashing into Earth because it senses all the evil in the world and wants to eradicate it. Then use Laser Man to destroy it and use its power for evil. Jumps off the ledge of the building to never be seen again, and then to return in the 5th game and actually is smart. Kidnaps Lan's father, takes our friend's PETs, so our net navies aren't usable. Use the Hikari report to transition Nebula Gray, your giant computer program that feeds on the hatred of humans, and rule the world. Yeah. While I understand the plan, Regal's problem isn't his goals. It's how he's very on the nose about everything. Not to mention the fact that 4 had the worst story that had nothing to do with anything whatsoever. And then in the fifth one, he kind of redeemed himself, which is why he's not higher on the list. But god damn it, could you have been any more obvious? Well, for once, Assassin's Creed is on this list of a bad list for once. And this one took a lot of thinking. Lackluster villains for Assassin's Creed. I could have gone a lot of different ways. I could have gone with someone from the XIII trilogy. Some of them weren't that great. Okay, that's a lie. A lot of them from the XIII trilogy are great. I could have gone with Crawford Starrick, who had a lot of build-up, but then execution-wise was still not the worst. I could have gone with Al Bahamut, the woman from the villain from Mirage, who we don't even get to kill, and had an absolute garbage development and absolute hated it. But no, or we could have gone from someone from Odyssey, my least favorite one. But no, I'm talking about Francois Thomas Germain, aka the French Sage from Unity. Dude. His plan was to bring the Templars back into the old age of silently manipulating things, because they got too public for his liking, and also, I guess, kind of working with the assassins in order to maintain peace. I get his goal. I get it. And he had a bunch of followers who helped him achieve his goals by causing the French Revolution and bringing down the matriarchy. Also, him believing that he's a descent of Jacques de Molay, a Templar from the beginning of the game. And it kind of sucked. Because he's a sage, so he's reliving memories, and he believes they're visions from Jacques de Molay. I do love how every single sage in the entirety of Assassin's Creed has their own issues and also has their own strengths. Like causing a whole riot, starving the citizens until they want the kings dead, which resulted in the execution of King Louis in order to cause chaos, while him and the Templars control it from the behind the scenes. Basically, a reset button is what he planned to do. And what I loved is that this guy tricked us right from the get-go. We run into him once when we try to get into the carriage to deliver the letter near the beginning. And then he pretends to be a simple silversmith who's been working with for the Templars. And we free him. And he gives us the name of a Templar who actually wanted to help Elise. That way, it's the last stepping stone in his whole scheme that stands in his way. I like his plan. But him himself is blah. He is boring. Absolutely boring. Again, his plan, I like. Him, blah. A majority of what I don't like about Unity are the Templars. The fact that we don't get the White Room scenes with them. The fact that we get that stupid memory gaze shit, which is... Although, I do love our final confrontation with him in his own memory. I did like that. But at the same time, it just feels like if this was a different game with a different base, it still wouldn't have worked. But we get what we get. So, again, Jermaine, not bad. You're not great. That's all I gotta say. The Magus from Guardians of the Galaxy Marvel. Such a boring villain. What I thought it was going to be the grand unifier raker of that space church or whatever is in fact an evil entity that feeds off of the joy of people by making people go into their memories and a happy moment. So, and that we accidentally released from the minds from one of the Infinity Stones. That was a part of Adam Warlock and his evil. So, we're dealing with an alien creature that feeds on the joy of people by letting them be with their loved ones who are dead in a fantasy illusion by making them happy. And it feeds off of their joy. Why does that sound so familiar?
Hi, I'm Hugh Bliss. Hi, I'm Hugh.
Stop saying that! Yeah. This thing is basically an oversized version of Hugh Bliss from Sam and Max. Great. It's a chore to get through the boss, the villain, and the final boss, not gonna lie, it is fun. But the whole slog of it being a side villain, but then the main threat at the end, it's lackluster in a way that the whole time we have to fight off this thing by making Drax realize it's not real, making Cosmos realize it's not real, and our daughter, that we believe throughout the whole game, to accept. It basically does what the Telltale game did, but the Telltale game did it better of, yeah, we all want to be with the people who we've lost in life, but sometimes moving on is what we need to do. But this is just... Again, final boss, though, was what made this thing great. But the entirety of it, that it's this main focusing threat, it just feels like it took a back seat the whole time. And then right when we got to the end, it took control for the last 10 minutes. It's not great. It's not... Oh my God, this list is all over the place, and I'm at fault for that. But at the same time, it gets worse from here. Next on the list is from a game I can't believe I'm actually talking about this game. Black Sad Under the Skin, which was an indie game based on a French comic? Another detective game. So, we investigate the supposed suicide of a gym trainer. We go through mob bosses, bookies, his prized fighter who was apparently doing drugs, and this whole conspiracy on other athletes and hidden drug enhancement. And Once again, you'd think I would be able to see it coming, the whole twist, but I didn't. And it sucks. I'm talking about technically the guy who hired us to do the case again, and that is Iron Arm Tim Thorpe, the best army buddy of the victim of the beginning of the case, and godfather, basically, of the woman who had us investigate the case, the adoptive daughter of the woman who hired us in the first place. My God, that's a lot to talk about. And yeah, Tim Thorpe, this Mufasa, Alex the Lion looking knockoff. So, to summarize, he was injured in the war, left him paralyzed. Old army buddy has a German scientist who was working on supplements that can boost up your strength again. So basically a form of steroids. And they're not cheap. So he gives them access, he gives the scientists access to a bunch of retired a bunch of retired athletes who want to get their golden years back. And to do so, he also opens up an ad agency where he gets more clients and better offers with ads in order to pay for all that. And that's discovered by the victim in this whole case. So it's a whole chain that it's almost like this tried to shove in so much into one case where, yeah, you know what? I can't even speak anymore. Yeah, I can't even say any more about this. This is... I mean, I should have kind of guessed, considering of how little he showed up in the game. And that's always a thing for Crime Game 101. The less someone actually appears, the more likely they have something to do with the overall problem. That's just what I've learned. So, Tim Thorpe. In another game, maybe this could have worked so much better. And if things, okay, yeah, they kind of do this thing where they end all the things of all the points of interest of the case. So, there's that. Next. Okay, this one is Lacklustre because of how easy I was able to guess it. How, as a villain, this is more of a side villain that was put into a villain role. But don't get me wrong. The boss fight is great. The ending actually works. And it's a classic revenge story. One that is absolutely so predictable within the first hour. I guessed it. Like, again, I hate bagging on this a little bit because I gave it a mid-review, but there were some parts of it I loved. Spider-Man Miles Morales. Again, as much as I liked playing it and as much as I want more for Miles in this series. His first outing is a DLC given a smidge of a bigger budget. And who I'm talking about here is his best friend, Finn, who is the Tinkerer. Not even at the part of the reveal, which is chapter 1, and I guessed it. Because of one thing where she comes over for dinner and there's an electrical issue and she fixes it. I'm like, it's her. Also, for those of you who aren't big Spider-Man people, Phineas is the name of the Tinkerer. So they kind of mixed it up a little bit here. And I just, the Tinkerer, you know what, I'm just going to get right to it. Revenge story. Her brother worked for the company Raxon, who is implementing these clean energy devices throughout Harlem. And Raxon's main guy is Simon Krieger. Two things with this. One, if there's going to be a Krieger in a video game, why can't it be this guy? I mean, at least we get a laugh on occasion. Two, this guy smells like a villain. Seriously, when you first played Miles Morales and this guy came on, tell me you didn't smell the big company is up to no good bullshit. Because I've seen it in almost pretty much every game. From Watch Dogs to Ferris Boyle of Arkham Origins' Cold Heart to Simon Stagg from Arkham Knight. Seriously, every big company who says that they are good people most likely have an evil lair somewhere. Seriously, again, Dr. Evil is more nonchalant. And this is a guy who put his face on a volcano lair. Holy shit. And I haven't even talked about Tinkerer yet. So, yeah, her brother worked there. Her and him snuck in, trying to prove something. And, Krieger found out, locked her brother in something, and basically killed him. And the big plot is that Tinkerer has created the underground in order to destroy Raxon, because those clean energy silos that they have in Harlem, yeah, it creates clean energy with deadly side effects. It creates a toxic environment as it's creating clean energy. And this was actually stated in the game because some people in Harlem are somewhat poor and some of them have health problems anyway. No one would notice. Yeah, they actually do that. From every crime show I've ever watched, this is a normal thing, what they do. Holy shit. And make Tinkerer lackluster mostly because I was expecting something so much cooler. And having to, and wanting to fight Krieg Like, maybe he got access to some of the Tinkerer's mechanized armor stuff and uses it and amplifies himself so no one can stop him. I was expecting it, but no. A mano fight with Tinkerer. Again, the quick bits near the end where she teams up with Miles and the fact that she wants to stop the machines, but at one point she doesn't realize the risk. So it's not much she's a villain's sake, as she doesn't understand the whole picture and she just wants revenge and she's blinded. So we gotta stop her. But goddamn it, the game itself, again, is a DLC. But Tinkerer, again, flip-flops from being helpful to being a villain again, to being helpful near the end, to being a great final boss. But yeah, enough. And again, I've said a lot of praise. But yeah, again, Tinkerer, flip-floppy, and that's why she's more at the middle of the list. Because not a great villain, very lackluster in that perspective, and where I thought it was going to go. But she is one of the better ones on this list that doesn't feel like it fits for the game. It really fits because it's Miles' first villain, and it was done great. So Tinkerer, you may not have been the best. You're not getting any awards for great villains, but you definitely started the bar. Well, deal me out, guys. Mega Man Star Force 3 had a lot of things going for it. Really cool boss design, new implications with the level designs and what we had to do, elevating it to a higher aspect. But if there's one thing I'm gonna nag on for the Mega Man Star Force series, is the villains aren't okay. The main villains aren't really that great. And that's what sucks. Which leads me to Mr. King, the leader of Dealer. Just his design alone got me really excited. And when I first started the Game Hub, I put him on my list for one of my favorite video game villains. But back then, I didn't really know how to fully analyze something. I was just going off by what I liked at the time. So for me to grow from in the last 5 years, about 5 years, he is definitely lackluster. He is a cyber terrorist, kind of bringing back the good old days of World 3, Gossipal. I'm not putting Nebula in that list. He has this robotic dealer chair where he just shuffles cards all the time. And I do love the motif. I love that he's supposed to be, and again, an eccentric billionaire who helps orphans. Seriously! Is there a manual that these people go through when they're deciding what kind of villain to use? Oh! Has a giant tech company that promises to use clean energy. Already used. Humanitarian of the Year who helps orphans. I swear to God. He did. He helped 2 orphans who were destroyed by technology, whose homes were destroyed by technology, and turned them into his henchmen. My problem is, in one way or another, all the final bosses, the final villains of the Mega Man Star Force series, we don't fight them. We don't fight the one in number 1. We don't fight 2. Here I thought we were going to get something. But no. His grand scheme was to collect enough noise from causing wizards to go rampage to bring Meteor G into orbit and destroy the world. Okay. And he gets sucked into the meteor later on, like near the end of the game, and he gets devoured by it, and he becomes one with the final boss, the Crimson Dragon. No, not that one. Just waiting for that joke to happen. So he becomes one with the Crimson Dragon, but there's no real him in it. It's just a monster that's created by all the noise that was created. We don't even get him merging with anything. Like, his own wizard is self-sufficient Dread Joker. So why didn't he get his own battle form? King. Meteor King. Meteor King. He could have morphed. For the first fight, he could have merged with some of the noise and the data from the meteor and become his own FM form, Meteor King. Or King Meteor. Whichever. It would have been cool. But no, he gets sucked up by the data, and that's it for Mr. King. What really gets me is how cool he looks, and his whole villainous persona is great. But it's at the last-ditch effort where they really could have made him awesome, and they don't. Next up. Yes. Uncharted has a lackluster villain. Yeah. And it's not the one from Lost Legacy. Chloe was great in that. I'm talking about what everyone thought was Drake's last outing in Drake's Deception. I'm talking about the British witch, Catherine Marlowe. The old lady who has been trying to get her hands on our ring for decades in order to find what Drake lied to Queen Elizabeth about in the Rubel Khabi Desert with Lawrence of Arabia. Now, we've had a giant gold sarcophagus that was the El Dorado that had a mummifying curse. The Jimson of the Tree of Life. And now we have an evil genie in a bottle polluting the water and making people go nutso crazy bird. A genie. That is dumb. An ancient city rises out of the desert and you go with a genie. You go with a genie. Are you out of your fucking minds? What's worse about Marlowe is as often as she comes out throughout the game, and it's mostly when she's got the high ground. From the start, she has this old British evil kind of atmosphere about her where she's polite, but she's intimidating, to kind of manipulating one of our friends, capturing us and threatening Elena and Sully, to, at the end of it all, she falls in a sinkhole with our ring, giving us a chance to save her, and we try, but she ends up dying. Wow. That is lackluster. I mean, I know we weren't going to fight her or anything, and we end up fighting her assistant in a boring-ass confrontation. Again, lackluster. She was prominent throughout the game, mostly. She had this presence about her that I liked. If done better, she could have been a great villain and probably wouldn't even be on this list. But it's the plot, it's her end that's lackluster. I was expecting something a little bit more than just, I mean, we had someone be sunken by the treasure he tried to get, to being destroyed by the very things that he wanted to become. And then we got the best one in Among Thieves. No, A Thief's End. And this is what we get for what people thought was Drake's last outing. I mean, everything else in the game was great, but it's just Marlo. Yeah, if you had cut her and replaced her with someone else, I wouldn't have noticed. Top 3, and it doesn't get any easier, guys. A villain that was great in the prequel. Well, not prequel, previous game. Went unidentified until the last minute of a side mission and got away. Had so much promise. And then and years later, he's back. And I talked about this a lot. Last year, actually, I talked about it. It's Hush from the Arkham series. Tommy Elliott. Fucking Hush. What makes him lackluster is the fact that they belittled how great people look. Oh my God, my head hurts. My head hurts now. Arkham fans loved his reveal. Arkham fans loved it. And the fact that he got away and that was the end of the story, great. And then with Arkham Knight, maybe some people were hoping he'd return. But what a way to ruin. What a way to belittle something that was so great and could have had great repercussions. But no. From the identity thief case to being great, and with the build-up reveal. Because, full disclosure, when I first played it, I didn't know anything about Hush. Well, except for the entry that happened in Arkham Asylum for the trophy for his riddle. And then they had the gall in Arkham Knight to belittle him to a one-section side mission. I've already talked about how that side mission could have been a lot better in my improving Arkham's Most Wanted. Go check that video out, guys, please. It's a video that I put a lot of heart and effort into, and hey, at least it means I don't have to talk about Hush that often. Great start in Arkham City. Miserable failure in Arkham Knight. You guys literally had the golden ticket for this villain, and you tore it up and you threw it in the fire. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. Great villain, but it's lackluster in the final execution. Well, I think it's kind of funny that since a remaster of this game... Oh, no, wait, actually, it's only the first one. Never mind. Epic Mickey 2. As much as I loved it, and as much as I criticized it, there are a lot of things I loved about it. And the whole thing... I'm at a loss for words, because as great as this was, you know what? Gremlin Prescott, this jackass, literally, I thought he was going to be evil right from the get-go. And the fact that he did sabotage the projectors and created that giant mecha thing that I talked about for situation bosses. Gimmick bosses. Full disclosure, I had a feeling he was working with the Mad Doctor, and the Mad Doctor may have worked on his ego, because Prescott's got one that could fill Shea Stadium twice. He did all of this, the sabotaging and everything, because he was annoyed with Gus for leaving him to work in the gag factory, thinking his brilliance was better utilized elsewhere. And the Mad Doctor used that to make Prescott play him as the villain of the story. The quake, the destruction of Mean Street, Prescott had, and then later on he's hypnotized into confessing, and then at the end of the game he's taken by the Pete's, Pete Pan, Small Pete, Big Bad Pete, Pete-tronic, unless you did his side mission and he's okay with you, and then he's taken. So, and also he had side projects in the float yard. Yay. What makes Prescott the second to worst lackluster villain is, as predictable as I thought he was going to be the villain, because having the Mad Doctor be the villain again would have been too on the nose, which they hit Mickey's nose on that multiple times. It just felt like there was more that was going to be done, because the game is only 3 chapters, which sucks. It sucks. And Prescott Again, obvious going to be villain. Utilized as a pawn. Don't know why I'm moving my hands like this. It makes as much sense as him being the villain. But my number one is a game from my childhood. A villain that had no presence in the game, zero in the very little in the story, and final overall lame. My number one lackluster villain. I know some games for kids, the plot is something so kind of basic, but you're thrusted into a main threat and you gotta fix everything. I never beat this game until a remaster of it came out years ago. Yeah. I sucked at video games when I was a kid. And this one, we never see him. Makes zero impact in the game overall. There are no cutscenes of him at all outside of the start. And it's from one of my favorite series. One of PlayStation's poster boys. I say we do the one that started it all. Spyro 1 Nasty Nork. This, yes, I know it was in the age where video games were slowly starting to become story-based instead of just beating things up for the heck of it. Nasty Nork petrifies all the dragons. But here's the thing. Taking the remaster out of the equation, we are told that Nasty Nork came up with a spell to turn our treasure into his orc minions. To where one of the dragons basically mocks him by saying he's a simple creature who's no threat and ugly. And after he says all that, Nork is in his lair saying the same thing. Simple, no threat, ugly, that does it. Waves his magic and turns them all into statues. Okay, 3 things. 1, how did Nork know what they were saying? How? In the remastered version, it shows that he's watching it on TV and stuff. But how? There's no TVs anywhere else in the dragon world. 2, the entire thing is him being pissed at us, so he petrifies us. That's the story. And 3, first off, it said in the beginning that there's 13,000 treasure overall. So if we had the treasure and then everyone gets petrified, how the fuck does Nork turn it all into his orc minions? No, seriously. Again, I know the first game, things can be a little not so coherent, but for an aspect, it doesn't make much sense. So, also, at the end of the game, in Orcs level, we're just re-freeing the dragons, some of the dragons that we freed already. How did they get petrified again? I don't get it. And again, Nork is one of the worst bosses ever. we chase him. We chase him. We fight a couple enemies. We find some thieves. And then he runs from us. This big bad orc who thinks he's a threat. And he runs away. And this obstacle course thing that we have to do at the end before we kill him. And even worse, they make a trophy in the remaster where you have to run around, where you have to chase him in the lap 5 times. So they make one of the worst boss fights ever and make it even worse. So, I've said it again. He's not present throughout the entirety of the game. Makes no comments. He creates these monsters to guard the levels. There's barely no dialogue. What makes him so lackluster is, as a kid, if you were like me and you were scared of some monsters when you were a kid, it's going to scare you. But now, thinking about it, Nork really isn't a threat. He's just a villain in a generic game. That's what makes him so lackluster. I mean, the games got better after Spyro the Dragon, but at the same time, Nasty Nork, you deserve to be number 1 on this lackluster list because you're so lackluster. From your lack of a goal, your childish behavior that set this whole thing in motion. God damn it. Well, all I can say is that's it for this list, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed the list because I know I didn't enjoy doing it, talking about it. Like, comment, subscribe down below, and oh my God. Join me next time where I take a look into the last of my game reviews of one of the most prominent detectives in gaming, and keep in with Villain Month. It's our first spooky outing. This is Gamer K logging out.